Welcome to Being Revolutionary.
Greetings, revolutionaries, and welcome to today's episode of I Love It When Planning Comes Together. Yeah, that was done on purpose, but we'll get into that in a minute here because that sounded
absolutely
cliche.
And for those of you listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to check us out over on YouTube. Just search Being Revolutionary.
Yep, and for those of you checking us out on YouTube under Being Revolutionary, make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast platform under Being Revolutionary.
Yeah, so while you're being revolutionary, did we mention check out Being Revolutionary?
That's right. A little repetition there, right? Redundancy is important.
As they say, if your content's no good, just say it louder and more often.
Yep. So we're safe either way.
Right. And then, of course, if you want to get in touch with us for any reason, you can write us at brev@trilogyfs.com. That's BEREV at trilogyfs.com. Yeah.
And please, it sounds like I'm begging, but I guess I can do it louder too. Please, take a quick minute to rate us, review, subscribe, smash buttons, and all that sort of stuff so that we can keep on having this good time sharing this information with you all. So anyways, how are you doing, Nate?
I'm good. It's another episode talking about planning. So I don't think anyone's shocked at this point that that's what they're coming here to talk about, but we're getting into it a little bit into more the nitty gritty of what planning is and isn't, and different forms of planning on today's episode. So I'm excited about that. And as always, sitting on pins and needles to see how you're going to bring us in with a creative intro.
Well, I mean, this definitely is a little bit more on the nose for us as far as like what we do, in our day job. Basically, I'm carbon dating myself when I talk about a plan coming together. So if you're around in the 80s watching TV, there was one of my favorite shows was The A-Team. What they did is they were basically a black ops team. They all left military service, but they were still like close friends, and basically found their social functionality in helping people that couldn't help themselves. So they would use their military tactics and things like that to help other people against, it could be a biker gang, it could be banking institution that was, trying to take people's land. It was, some really great purpose of helping people, which I kind of liked. That actually kind of feeds into probably some of my psychology with liking to help people too. But the principal character would say, I love it when a plan comes together. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is I love it when planning comes together. So we're going to drive home the importance of how proper planning is essential to achieving the goals that someone has set for themselves. We talked about goals in the previous episode. We've talked about financial philosophies and household policies when it comes to planning. So it just seemed pretty logical for us to come into this next part, which is actually creating a plan to execute.
Right.
So that being said, welcome to Being Revolutionary. So Nate, when someone comes to you and says, what does it mean to have a plan? And it doesn't have to be professional. I mean, I know we get that pretty often. But just when you hear that, what comes to mind?
Well, to me, reflecting on some conversations we've had previously, it really comes down to the execution of a step-by-step process to move you toward your priorities and goals. That's really, to me, what the definition of having a plan is. Because we can say we want things, but those are really just desires, or maybe what you would call hopes or dreams.
Yeah.
But it's not really a plan to accomplish those things unless there's, tangible action steps that you can follow and track the progress on. And also examine for success and or failure, and re-examine and re-examine and re-examine. And so to me, it's mostly about kind of that concept of what's next. What's next that I can do to fill in the blank towards whatever goal or priority is that you're working on. And the more specific and measurable and all the goal-oriented stuff that we talked about in previous episode or episodes even, the better. because then you can have benchmarks that you're using in conversation with yourself, with your spouse, with your accountability partner, with your advisor, to actually check whether or not your plan is working, or if you need to adjust your plan or come up with a whole new plan for that matter. So there's a lot that goes into that, and we'll get into this concept a lot more as we move through this conversation. But there's a nice lens that we've used, and we've used this language before previously on the podcast, to view planning through, and that is the lens of science and the lens of art. Yeah. Right. And I think of those concepts too. Science being essentially numbers and data, facts.
Can't deny it. It is.
Yeah, exactly.
What it is.
Historical reasoning, right? Or just straight up data that says yes or no on things that we're working on or things that we're considering. And then you have art, which is the nuance, culture, personality, strengths and weaknesses, personal track record on how you've done things and what's worked well or what's not worked well for you, and all of the experience and baggage that we bring to the table as individuals or couples or whatever as well. So that science and art piece is a cool way to think through the concept of planning, because if you don't have both, your plan probably is not going to run as efficient as it could, or even if it runs really efficient, you may not like it.
Right.
And then that's the thing in the end, like, we want authenticity in our finances and in our plans, just like we want it in all areas of our life. Because if we don't have it, sooner or later, what we wake up with is something that we don't like because it's not real to us. Yeah. Right. We've done something that someone wants us to do, or we're doing something that somebody else wants of us that's not in line with our own character. And so that's where that art piece is so important as well. So I think that's kind of where we're headed from that 10,000 foot view.
Yeah.
Science and art and planning, and obviously there's going to be some other considerations that we need to have in mind as well. So, do you have any thoughts on any of that stuff?
Well, one of the things that when we were putting this episode together that you actually taught me early on in my career, and it's no big surprise, it's 100% true. You would reference our planning processes when our team would do a plan for families. And you'd explain that it's organic. It grows, it shifts, it changes. It's subject to circumstances. But you summed it up, and in your typical, like, yours a nice personality, you're a man of few words, and you're like, hey, it's organic. And then I sit here and I want to give them the hug and be like, yeah, and that means blah, 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 blah. And I want to like talk it to death.
Right.
So, but that's what I thought of too, when we were going through this content, is I was like, yeah, you know what? This just drives it home even more that it's organic. And hopefully, we get that across to people today, because a lot of the times people make these decisions, they're black and white, but life adds color, not to sound too much of a cliche. Yeah. Life adds color. And that's the truth is, you might come up with this, if this, then that scenario, but that's not how life works. And I can attest to it. And if you've been listening to previous episodes, you've heard me attest to it repetitively. Right. So that's sort of what I'm thinking. But one of the things I did want to make sure we touched on was the fiduciary concept.
I think this is really good. When I saw this in your outline for our conversation today, I thought, oh, this is really good, because we really haven't. We've talked around this concept on how we operate, but I think it's really important that we just kind of hit the nail on the head here really directly in a conversation, because a lot of people that will consume these conversations have had varying experiences throughout their life that kind of ping pong between these two concepts we're about to talk about. And that's kind of fiduciary style advice, or fiduciary thinking is really what it is, versus non-fiduciary or kind of suitability oriented sales.
Yep.
Really is what it is. And I'll kind of ping in with some examples as you kind of walk your way through our definitions here. But it's really important for people to understand that as we work our way through a conversation like this, that we've made a conscious choice to orient ourselves this direction. And it wasn't by mistake. You know,
Right.
we didn't just happen our way into this style of thinking and planning and conversations that we've been having on this podcast and with our, you know, families and individuals that we're fortunate enough to work with. This was kind of, you know, hard leather-like work over years and years and years and years to arrive at some of these conclusions. Like, and with that being said, we're also still figuring it out. That's another good thing to say as well. And that's okay. The team that we are in working with clients or our office or our firm that we work with as a whole is constantly evolving based on this concept of fiduciary thinking. And so I think that's why it's really good to define it and then kind of give some good kind of workable examples in the real world that people can really understand what that means, maybe for the first time.
Yeah.
So why don't you define it for us, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Absolutely. So fiduciary is basically a person or organization. I'm reading so I got my outline right here. I'm reading the actual definition to keep me on track. So fiduciary is a person or organization.
We all know you don't use words that are that big without reading them, Matt. Go ahead.
I can write them, but if I try to talk, I mean, if my client is listening, she'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I was on a meeting yesterday and I had some coffee, which is what I'm drinking today. And my mind was going 50,000 miles an hour and my mouth was trying to keep up. And it just looked like I was the class nerd trying to ask the prom queen out on a date. I was just a mess. And she started laughing at me and I apologized, whatever. So
anyways, I cut
working
you
your
off.
Strengths, right? Not your
Go
weaknesses.
ahead.
So
go ahead.
Fiduciary. Fiduciary is a person or organization that acts on behalf of another person or persons to manage assets in their client's best interest. So for those of you listening on podcast, I'm doing my air quotes here. Okay. Mm-hmm. Client's best interest. And something I do want to note is that, like, Nate and I are going to play this, like a majority of our experience in a fiduciary capacity obviously has to do with the work that we do from a financial management and financial planning standpoint. I hope that this also drives home the concept of fiduciary advice everywhere, where it could be diet, it could be, so doctor, okay, they need to act in a fiduciary capacity. That's really the big picture and what we're talking about. So I just wanted to point that out so that folks don't get caught up on our on the discussions of what we're saying while we're trying to illustrate it, from a career or industry standpoint. So one of the examples that I use is a general, not a specific story. Shocking, right? Matt's not telling a story this episode, but the episode's not over yet. Anyways.
Don't hold your breath.
Right, exactly. Tire mechanic. And I know I've talked to you about this before, and I've used this as examples, especially for clients that may not be real familiar with the industry in general. So they may never have invested. They may never have thought about working with a financial planner. So a fiduciary concept analogy that I use is a tire mechanic or a car mechanic, whatever, the person that puts tires on your car. Mm-hmm. So a non-fiduciary tire mechanic basically makes sure that the tires are on the car. You paid for tires, you get tires. They don't take into consideration the size of the tires, if all four tires match, if they're the best quality tire for the vehicle that you want to put it on, if it matches what you want, which is like maybe there's a safety or mileage consideration that you want to have. They just, you pay the person and they slap tires on your car. So they basically put a suitable tire on your car, and it could vary or whatever, as long as it's a tire that functions and everything. There you go.
It may or may not be the best tire for your
vehicle,
long-term planning interests for that vehicle, but the tire is suitable. It's not going to fall off the car and break immediately. It will, go on the car and at least start to work, in that way. That makes sense to me. May not last
as long as you would hope or whatever, but so that's a non-fiduciary role. And
so the flip side of that would be, and I hope people have had this experience, because I've had this experience with a tire guy. company.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite. Because I don't know. You know me. I don't know anything about cars.
Right.
So for me, anything related to car problems or maintenance issues and all of that, I always feel like I'm just standing there naked in the breeze. You know what I mean? Just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can be totally being taken advantage of, and I wouldn't know because it's just not something I've ever been interested or learned that much about.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
So what's a fiduciary tire experience like?
That would be, it's not difficult to figure out in contrast to what the example I just gave, but basically it's a person that walks through the process with you, understands clearly what you need from the tires, what your expectations are. So maybe you want a 20,000 mile tire with road hazard. Maybe you want an off-road tire instead of a performance tire because of where you live. They understand your situation, and then they provide you with a recommendation based off of quality, suitability, the pricing, as far as I mean, you can definitely probably pay, when one car I owned, it cost $650 a tire.
No.
I would not recommend that. That was in my younger days. That was a different Matt Phillips back then. But anyways,
the non-budget focused Matt
the one
Phillips.
that's like, oh, what? Yeah, that's what credit cards are for, right?
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that car also had a big payment associated with it as well.
It was a lease payment, and
bingo.
You know what? It was it was a lease payment that I couldn't afford. It was
the triple whammy of stupidity,
dude. Oh my gosh, that's like when I started. When I was a financial advisor. I also tell people, I'm like, look, I'm not going to come at you from a hypocrisy perspective. I've lived this stuff.
I have been there.
Yeah. Yep. So anyways, taking into account price, like, is it going to work with your budget? Is it going to meet your expectations? And basically a fiduciary role puts all these factors together and then tries to come up with the best solution based off of that. So, sure, the best tire might be $650, but you can't afford that. So what's the next thing based off of your criteria that you've set forth as my client or as the tire mechanic's client? What can I do with what you've got? And that's essentially the concept of fiduciary, of being a fiduciary.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the good ways of thinking about that, I think, that can be helpful is it's nuanced decision making that's not necessarily always black and white as well, right? It's data and information meeting with human conversation to come to the resolution that has the highest probability of success or helping the person. Right. That's basically what it comes down to. And what can be somewhat frustrating about that is that from the consumer standpoint is sometimes there's not going to be as much speed or clarity to that decision-making process as one might expect.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's where it's an important thing for people to think about when they're going into any transaction-oriented process, right? If they're going to be buying something, a larger scale purchase of some sort for their house or a car or some sort of financial item that they're going to be doing a transaction to acquire, I think it's helpful to think about how much of this process have I already made up my mind on, right? How much, and for some people, they're research mavens, right? I mean, they really enjoy the process of getting their hands dirty and figuring out what they want or what they don't want. And therefore, like, the buying process is just kind of the end application of a long research project that's already occurred. And we get that all the time in our industry, right? People who have not a lot of need for the financial planning aspect of what we do, but they need some of the tasks that we can perform for them, maybe investment management services, or they need help with an insurance plan of some sort, or they need to get their trust done with our estate planning attorneys. So those are the tasks of the financial plan, but they've already figured out what they want their plan to look like. And now we're just filling in the gaps.
Yeah.
Right?
That basically it's goals. It's all about goals. Like if you've got a target in front of you, you know what you're aiming for. If you don't, and that could be, retirement, it could be buying a car, it could be paying cash for a car, whatever. Like
Right.
knowing what the goals are makes that process of creating those steps towards that goal just a lot simpler.
You have kind of that engineering mind in a sense where it's like you're not afraid of complicated stuff, but also what you like is being able to then execute it in very chewable bites. So the concepts might be super grand and complicated, but the execution then is what you're saying should be step by step by step. Basically, if this, then this, or if this happens, then do this, or if you put this input here, you get this output there. And I think that's what that fiduciary mindset is really all about. It's about humility, more than anything, right? So it's understanding that sometimes in a transaction, people know exactly what they want, right? And we just need to execute to the best we can what it is that they're looking for. And that's, by the way, assuming we're even the best fit to do that for them.
Bingo.
Right? Which is sometimes not the case.
Exactly.
But then there's a whole nother experience that we have all the time too, which is people come and they have no idea what to expect. They have no experience working with a financial advisor. They have no concept of what a financial plan is or what it does or what it isn't. And so they kind of come in with their hands up going, I'm willing to learn. I want to try. I think this is important, either because I've kind of talked with people or I have this innate sense or someone told me it was important. So what do I do next? And that is, talk about a burden for someone in our situation to be careful, right? Because we could literally paint that picture any way we want to.
I love that part of our job so much though. And that is so the analogy that I'll typically use in these situations as I explain to folks, I try to put it in a concept that like you said, chewable bites. So, I tell them, look, a lot of folks, when it comes to their financial plan or actually planning it about anything, but in this example, financial planning, they kind of take it like a speedboat. They're going to go from island to island. Okay, we're gonna save for a house, and they speedboat over there, and that's all they focus on. That's the primary goal. Then they go, okay, now we did that. Now we're gonna go ahead and invest, and they go over and invest. Okay, now we're gonna put a emergency fund together, and it's like all these independent voyages to different destinations,
right?
Rather than understanding that as a whole, it's the vehicle is more like an aircraft carrier, this massive ship, this vessel that has an end destination in it. And while you might hit these different points along the destination, oftentimes it takes a crew. So that's what we've kind of been illustrating for you folks so far is it's, financial philosophies and policies and goals and accountability, whether it's with your spouse or significant others or family or hiring a professional like us, whatever the case might be. It's a team effort. Like you can try doing it alone and that might work fine. But for the most part, planning is a team sport a lot of the time. And it involves a lot more navigation than what people may think.
Well, and to that end as well, it can be helpful to be receiving counsel from people who have wider perspective than what you yourself have.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you can do that in a couple of different ways, right? You can kind of gather resources that are kind of opinion oriented, general resources, right? So I think of the internet / asking people in your network, what do you think about this, right? So now that's
dangerous.
That can be, it's dangerous, but it could also be extraordinarily helpful depending on how diligent you're willing to be, right? Like you can for sure figure out how to do almost anything if you're willing to put the time, effort, and energy into it. But the question you have to always consider is how much margin do I have in my life to dedicate to this project, right? Like my dad is a phenomenal woodworker, completely and totally self-taught, right? And he's always hungry to do more and better and newer things, right? Because it's a hobby and it's something that he loves. And now that he's retired, he has the margin in his life to be able to dedicate hours and hours and hours to that. Guess who's not a good woodworker? Me.
You. No.
Why? I've given it no time whatsoever, right? I like the benefits of beautiful woodworking, right? The really nice mitered edge that comes together on the perfectly done table or cabinet and all that. Do I know how to do a mitered edge? No. I know what the angle is, I think, right? Probably cut my finger off in the process. So that concept of getting some kind of external objective coaching can be really, really helpful for people, but you have to be careful where that coaching is coming from. And that's the key, right? So there's opinions, which you can get opinions galore on the internet, and you can get opinions from people you know who think they know you and think they know what you want. But you have to kind of have a stop sign up in your own mind that opinions are opinions. They're not consultative advice. There is a difference between those two things. Like consultative advice or fiduciary advice is someone who is putting themselves out there saying, I'm going to learn enough about the situation so that we can understand the data, benefits, consequences of a decision, and have a discussion together and arrive at a conclusion based on some sort of almost scientific method, in a sense.
Yeah.
As opposed to, well, I think you should do this because of this. And God only knows where that opinion's coming from, right?
Right. Yeah. And it makes me think of, and I don't have a specific sports analogy, but it makes me because when you said coaching, and I know we reference the services that we provide for our clients as coaching as well. But I really do it's intensely believe that, you can be the most natural talent on the planet. Like you can be a fantastic baseball player and your batting average is, phenomenal. I don't know anybody that said, you know what? If only I didn't have that coach giving me tips on how to hit better, maybe I would have done better.
This is perfect timing. I was just listening to this today. So this pitcher for the Chicago White Sox, Lucas Giolito, he just threw a no-hitter last night and almost a perfect game. He walked one guy and got everybody else out, and he struck out 13 guys. It was literally just next to a perfect outing. And it was one of the best pitching performances in the history of baseball, statistically speaking.
Wow.
This guy, the White Sox are not his first team. He was a draft pick of the Washington Nationals, and they eventually traded him for somebody else because he was a super talented guy out of the Northwest Valley in Los Angeles, 6'6". I mean, just a total stud, but he basically could not get it together at the major league level. He wasn't realizing his talent. And so when he was traded, one of the things he did was tear down his entire history, everything he knew about pitching, and rebuilt himself with help from coaches from the ground up. So it's actually eerie if you look at footage of him, and he has high level footage from before because he was a great player. If you look at the pitching motion, the pitches he's actually throwing versus not throwing, it doesn't even look like the same guy other than he's this 6'6" Adonis, basically.
Wow.
That's the only thing that looks the same. So I think that reinforces what you were just saying is this guy's career, which is now on a comet-like projection, right? Probably going to make hundreds of millions of dollars and who knows how successful he's going to be, probably very successful if he can stay healthy. None of that happens without him at some point being willing to be told, I think this is not as good as it could be, and here's what I think we should do to tweak it, and then having the humility to accept that and change, which is amazing for someone that's at that high of a level from a natural talent standpoint.
Yeah, that is pretty incredible. And that kind of also illustrates the art side of having a process too. Cause I'm trying to envision that as you've made it in society's eyes. So you're a major league baseball star now. You're making money, you're getting paid, you're, doing what you love. And to say, this isn't quite right. I don't know what to do about this. And then seeking the counsel to do it. And then that counsel comes up with, we're going to completely reinvent how you wind up and throw. How's that sound? Just that's to me is all art right there. We need to adjust the processes, rethink this, and actually retrain your body to do what it has been doing for years, probably at least 2 decades, maybe a decade and a half.
Yeah.
You know,
probably since he was 5 years old till he was in his probably late teens or at least early 20s.
Yeah. Yep. So,
Difficult,
definitely.
but really cool. I mean, but think about the responsibility on the part of the coach there as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're putting yourself out there if you're saying, here's what I think we should do and why. And I'm going to guess that they had some data that came along with that decision making as well. And I mean, modern sports is incredible. The amount of data they can gather, especially in baseball with like high speed cameras. I mean, they can show like the spin rate of a baseball. So they can tell like this pitch is less effective than that pitch because the spin rate's higher and therefore the ball moves more in transit from your hand to home plate. And so if you throw this pitch more than that pitch, you'll be more successful. I mean, there is a lot of science behind that. And of course, our industry is laden with data and numbers and analysis and facts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, facts like you are or are not on track for your retirement goal, right? I mean, that is based on what you're saving and what the anticipated rate of return is of your plan. You are or are not on track. That is a yes or no question at some point for everybody that we work with, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the plan is doomed if it's not on track, or that doesn't mean the plan is going to succeed for sure if it is on track, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So there is a scientific aspect to building a financial plan, because feeding back to what we talked about at the kind of on our introductory conversation, once we know the facts, we can start to back into tangible steps or solutions or plans.
Yeah.
Right. In the concept of what we're talking about today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that at times, even us as professionals, and I'm sure baseball coaches have had this happen, you know, it's not the fun Hollywood story, so we don't hear that as much as you see or hear about the successes.
Right.
But you slam in a brick wall sometimes where it's like, I mean, I've looked at families' plans where I'm like, I have no idea how this is going to work for them. And I have to really dive into the passion and basically the innovative side. And I know you do the same because I've watched you do it and you've helped me do it on countless occasions. And so like the innovation, you know, a lot of people see those brick walls and you basically got the fight or the flight reaction to it, you know.
Yeah.
Where
bingo.
You're gonna either be like, oh yeah, you know what? My plan's not gonna work. Here, hold my beer. Hold on a second here. Let's get this done. You know? And
Right.
then you've got the flight, which tends to happen probably more often than you or I would like to see with folks.
Yeah.
They just feel distracted or discouraged and defeated, all the D's, all the D words. And they give up. And then another time period goes by, 3, 5, 7 years, and then they meet somebody that's like, oh man, and then they feel regret for giving up on what, you know, oh, if only I would have just saw this through or whatever. And we want to encourage folks that are listening, if you feel like you're in a brick wall, innovate. It happens in our culture's history, our world's history. Every time something happens, this COVID stuff, innovation, like you and I, Nate, are actually good examples of that because we just started recording. You know, we were just getting into our regular pattern with recording content, our process, and then wham, we can't even record in the same room. What are we going to do?
We had to finish season 1.
Yeah.
From 2 bedrooms, 35 miles, 40 miles apart. Right.
Yeah. And now it's become.
But the tools are available.
Well, now it's become.
No, now it's normal.
Part
now
of
I
our
never
branding.
want to see you in person ever again.
That's right.
Wait, what? No, but innovation basically thrives only out of problems for the most part, right? I mean, you could think of examples from the financial industry like mutual funds.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Back in the 19 teens and 20s, the stock market is exploding in popularity, but it's not accessible, right? Well, it is, but it's also extraordinarily scary because of the volatility that existed in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that on previous episodes, like the big crashes, right?
Yep.
And so innovative thinkers thought, well, what is a way that we can break down this kind of scary Wall Street thing and package a product that's consumer friendly? And therefore, hey, we can just buy basically bundles of stocks, put them together, and, kind of market and name them in a very, simple to understand fashion. Like, we'll make a blue chip growth mutual fund, right? It's blue chip companies that are aiming for long-term growth. And if you want to invest in that goal, hey, buy this fund and we'll do the rest for you.
Right.
Very innovative idea. And you look to, 100 years later now, where the investment industry, I mean, the amount of customization available, the amount of access to information, how fast things can get done, it just continues to innovate and innovate and innovate. And that's just one industry.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you look at things like Amazon. I mean, everybody knows Amazon.
Oh, geez.
Amazon's the Disney of this century. I don't know. Maybe I'm going out on a limb because Disney's kind of Disney of this century, but.
Well, they kind of are I would say they are the second industrial revolution realized, right? Like, if the internet culture is like the second industrial revolution in the 90s, Amazon is like the kind of not conclusion, but like the apex, in a sense, of that.
Yeah. So
where they've commoditized time somehow,
right?
Right.
And money, actually, because I mean, you and I, we're at the store. We're contemplating a big purchase, and I don't know about you, but first thing I do, I go into my app, and the salesperson that's standing there next to me sees me doing it, and I'm like, oh yeah, well, can you give it to me? It feels weird
doing it, honestly.
I have no problem. I'm sorry.
I know.
That's just the market.
It is what it is. But yeah, I do it too. Of course I do.
Yeah. And so it's just amazing. But that was birthed out of book buying originally, and then it evolved into more of a retail space where it carried a lot more things. But I think that they really hit that lever of success when they did the Prime membership and the 1 day or 2 day, whatever. It doesn't matter what day shipping I order, it comes in 3 days. So that's what I know it as. I won't call it 3 day shipping because I know that's not the bubble that you click when you're making your order. But regardless, the pricing and the time,
Well, and those are just a couple examples of how innovation comes in kind of a crisis moment, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it was for the financial services industry looking to deliver, or if it was the retail sales space changing because of the internet. Mm-hmm. But the major takeaway, I think, for people on this is that if you find yourself with a goal or a priority that you don't feel like you're making enough progress fast enough on, don't just shrug your shoulders and say, well, I guess I've got bad luck.
Right. Exactly.
That moment of crisis is the time to press in and go, okay, it's time to change something. And maybe it's time to change something very dramatically. Maybe it's time to rework my personality, right? Or maybe it's time to rework my living situation or my financial priorities as a whole, because this thing, whatever that thing is that's important to you, is not happening. And there is a reason it's not happening, right? And if you have any control over that whatsoever, that is the moment to hit the pause button and really press into that situation and figure it out, because that you're going to get results when you are most sick and tired of something being the way that it is. That is when you're going to be most motivated for change.
Yeah, that's the opportunity for innovation is what you're seeing there, and it doesn't feel like it. It feels like crap. And we want to talk about personality and self-realization, and
well, that's just it, right?
I feel like I could write a book. I'm not going to.
Oh my gosh. Because it's so uncanny, because some people do this as a natural course of who they are all the time. And then other people have a ton of trouble with change, or a ton of trouble with confrontation, or just making decisions, right? Yeah. Making any decision at all. So it's good to kind of bullet point kind of our way through some of these different mindsets or personality types that people have, because if you can have some self-realization that, that's me,
right,
then you can in a kind of a cognitive behavioral therapy sense, kind of identify when it's happening and then get help.
Yep.
Right. From someone.
From a fiduciary source.
Yes,
and
exactly.
That's what we want to make sure we're driving home. So I want to disclaimer this. We're gonna give I think it's 6. Yeah, it's 6 different categories of personality type. Okay. If
these are some great titles, oh my gosh.
If you agree with it, then let me know. Write us at brev@trilogyfs.com. If you don't or you're offended, write Nate at brev@trilogyfs.com. No, I'm kidding. Anyways. 6 categories of people, and I've taken some of this. I'm actually present in probably 3 or 4 of these.
Okay,
you're probably looking at it and you're like,
we'll let our highly educated audience guess at to which ones those are, or I'll just tell them as you're talking. Also you. No, it's good. It's good.
Anyways, so what we want to drive home with this is the self-realization part. It tends, from what we've seen professionally, what we've experienced personally, and like in my case, it's actually I've self-discovered, but it could be friends, family, whatever. You can observe it or you can experience it firsthand. But typically, this is kind of what you look at from different facets and personality types. So the first one's the rule follower. So when it comes to, and this is in the context of planning, making a plan, whatever it is, financial, physical, diet, emotional, whatever, spiritual, whatever plan you've got, this tends to be the personality traits of folks. So you got number 1, the rule follower. So they're great at following a plan that's been created. They're even really good because they follow the rules at adhering to the scope of the plan without failing. All right. Downside is flexibility. They have a hard time changing up because they are so fixated on the rules. And what did we say earlier? Planning is organic. It's going to change. Circumstances change. I mean, if COVID has taught us nothing, which I know for a fact it's taught a lot of people a lot of different things, we've learned that you got to be flexible. So if you're a rule follower, recognize that, use your strengths, and acknowledge your weaknesses and plan. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Second is the enthusiast. Mm-hmm. So the enthusiast loves the idea of having a plan, tends to be really good at creating plans, but then may have trouble sticking to or even starting the plans, or certainly seeing them through to completion without getting kind of goo goo gaga over the next exciting plan, right? So these are people that tend to be kind of visionary oriented, but not a lot of execution, right? Great personality type to have a coach of some sort, right? Because if you can get fired up and get yourself fired up and create goals and priorities, but you have trouble on the accountability side, on the execution side, this type of person does really well with a coach, right? Be it financial or otherwise, right? A personal trainer, a dietitian, right? A health and wellness type coach, a professional mentor, right? Who can see you and walk you through your career path, right?
100%.
Goal-oriented people, oftentimes, depending on kind of the secondary personality traits, tend to be this way. We see it all the time, right? We love working with people like this because they oftentimes have no trouble making money, but then building the kind of the girders underneath that to keep some of it, right? Tends to be tougher. So that's the enthusiast.
Yeah. The thing with someone that's enthusiastic is it can be a squirrel moment at any time. You'd be like, okay, today I'm on my financial plan. Oh, what's squirrel? Okay, boat. No. You have someone there like, no, Matt. Okay, let's refocus and back to task. So,
nice.
Anyways, number 3, cautious explorer. So these folks, they're reserved. They're more willing to listen and consider a plan, and once they accept it, once they believe in it, then they're usually really good at following it, and they can be flexible and things like that. Problem with this personality is that they tend to procrastinate when executing it. They just, I don't know, I'm going to wait a little bit more. I don't think the market is right. Oh, you know what? I'm going to diet next week because we've got birthdays this week or whatever.
I'm going to do more research and more research and more research and more research and then wake up someday having never done anything.
It's kind of like folks that are like, I'm going to wait till I'm ready to have children.
By the way, you use the word cautious. That's the perfect word, right? What is that really? Fear of failure.
Yeah.
That's all it is, right?
True. Yep.
It's a great example. Next is the diva. Ooh, perfect. Perfect for me. All right. Radiates confidence in all areas of consideration, creating and implementing a plan, right? Constantly challenges themselves to do greater, tends to challenge outside ideas on their own and may not set proper time horizons for goals, right? This is the type of person who, I honestly, I can reflect a lot of this in myself, right?
Yeah.
Your own worst critic, right?
Yeah.
But also very confident in your abilities to succeed, usually a really hard worker as well. But not so good at taking outside criticism, right? Or receiving coaching in a,
like a humble,
from a humble way. Yeah,
exactly.
Gotcha. So I think that's a hallmark again of people oftentimes who have all kinds of success, but then struggle in smaller areas that could really boost their efficiency.
Yeah. Number 5 is the doubter. So doubter, kind of self-explanatory. They like to explore and ask insightful and in-depth questions when pondering a plan. They're really good at creating a plan that is specific and realistic, and that's because they're questioning every aspect of the plan. So when they come to a conclusion, they've got pretty much all the complicated areas unwound, which is fantastic. Problem with it is that they tend to fail to implement the plan because they never get to that point of actually unwinding it to their own comfort level. They're like, oh, I think this will work, but I just know there's something I'm missing. There's something that I just don't get because there's no way it can be this easy or this efficient or this effective. There's so many different things you can question. So they doubt every single step.
Fear of change.
Bingo.
Right?
Yep.
The kind of, and it's almost the opposite of the enthusiast, right? Where the enthusiast always assumes the grass is greener, right?
Where do we go?
Oh, I'm going to try this because this is awesome, right? Yeah. The doubter almost assumes my grass is pretty good, right? And I don't even know if they have grass over there, right? So that is, and again, not honestly, some of the wealthiest people I know are these types of people.
Yep.
Because they also tend to save like crazy because they tend to fear negative things happening, or they're very, very conservative in their cash flow plan. And just because it's ingrained in their personality type. So it's always good. There's always ways to mine the most useful traits out of these personalities and put them to work.
Yeah.
In good ways. But the recognition of the weaknesses and then getting help in those areas can be really, really supportive in that way too.
Totally.
I love this last one, number 6.
I can't believe you got this one.
The dental patient, which is a great title. This is someone who usually doesn't have a plan at all, right? Or what we've referred to around Trilogy for, 15 years as the no plan.
Yeah.
Everybody has a plan, right?
Right.
Some people are just on the no plan.
Right. My plan is to not plan.
Right. This is the type of person who waits to acknowledge that a plan is needed until the opportunity is already passed or the problem has already occurred that the non-plan has led to, right?
Yep.
Oh, I guess I should have whatever, right? Or I wish I would have fill in the blank, right?
Exactly.
And what happens here is that leads to essentially a vicious lack of planning cycle.
Yep.
Where all of the time that should be spent proactively getting ahead on things is spent fixing things that have already occurred and broken, right? So the lack of planning creates that implementation process of constantly chasing one's tail as opposed to getting out ahead of whatever it is that you're looking to do. So kind of looking back instead of looking forward. And that's why I love the dental patient name on that is great, because it's the classic, I'm fine. Oh my God, I have a root canal.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
When all you need
Well,
to
I
do
guess
is
I
floss.
should have, right. Or even right. Or I should have just had the cavity filled when
Yep.
it was a small cavity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But now my whole left side of my head is swelled, right? Because my molar's jacked, right? So that's that. And we have some fun with this. I mean, but the reality is we all have pieces of a dental patient in our personality. It just depends on where in your life, right? For some of us, it's money. For some of it's other areas of our lives, but it's more of the let's put out fires versus let's prevent fires
Exactly.
type thinking.
Yeah.
And so it's okay to have a little piece of that. We all do, for sure.
Yeah.
But if it's going to be something that's going to be domineering your long-term success or failure, that makes it tough. Makes it really tough.
And that's really ultimately what I know you and I were trying to strive to illustrate in this episode is, creating a plan. It isn't going to do anything but help. And guess what? If the plan starts going down a road that you're like, oh, that's not really working, then you remake the plan. There's a concept that we talked about early on in this podcast, and that was, in changing your mindset from asking yourself, what's the worst that can happen? I'll give it a shot, to why am I doing this? Because a lot of the times that's what people do, is they're just like, you know what? I'll make more money, or I'm not retiring for another 20 years, so I'll go ahead and I'll borrow against my 401k so that I can pay my car off or something. Like, it's this seize the day kind of thing. And there are concepts and circumstances where that is fine. Financial longevity or longevity of any type, I don't think that behavior fits there in pretty much any circumstance, other than you might get lucky.
Well, it's temporal,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's just it. You might have a season of success, or maybe get lucky, or maybe have a really good work ethic and be able to kind of get yourself out of problems for a period of time. But eventually, the lack of a plan comes to the forefront when you can't kind of Wile E. Coyote your way out of situations anymore.
Yeah.
And And that ultimately is kind of where we wanted to get to with this conversation today. And we took we took a wide ranging of ways of getting around this to say this, very directly here at the end. And that is, just be careful with who you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah.
This is a self-serving conversation with us for today. Sure. Okay, whatever. But really think about definitely the consultants that you're hiring.
Yep.
That they have that fiduciary style approach, whether that's a financial advisor, right? Or an insurance consultant, or a physical exercise trainer, or a dietitian, or a therapist, or for that matter, a pastor,
Yep.
right? Make sure that the best interest that's being considered is yours.
Yep.
In those relationships. And by the way, think about that some in your relationships that aren't professional consultative relationships too.
Yeah.
And this is kind of self-helpy of me, but it's often been said that you will become like the people that you spend most of your time with. So if you look around and see your 5, 6, 10 best friends that you spend most of your time with, are they the type of person that you want to be or not? Doesn't mean you have to fire all your friends. But it might be worth considering, should I start spending more time or less time with people based on if they are helping me become the person I would like to be or not over time as well. So that concept of recognizing that whether we like it or not, this kind of thematic stuff is going on in our lives, and recognizing it and then making some decisions that are in line with some of those realities can be really, really helpful.
Yep. And then keep in mind also, as we covered, look at seasons of difficulty as ways to innovate. And this comes from a very personal, very specific Like I've suffered a couple of those seasons. It looks like I'm heading down a season like that right now. And I've learned to, embrace the difficulty. It doesn't mean I'm enjoying it. It doesn't mean I'm okay with it. It doesn't mean that I'm glad that it's happening. In fact, the opposite. And Nate, you've bore witness probably more than anybody in my life.
It doesn't mean we're always good at it either. Like that's the mythology, is that, once I kind of come to this revelation, now my problems are going to be gone. No. I mean, your problems are still going to happen.
Yep.
Stuff that you bring upon yourself, or that we bring upon ourselves, and stuff that's totally external to you that you have no control over whatsoever, is going to come into your life.
Yep.
And then it's at that point, now what, that we've been talking about kind of through this conversation.
Yep. Use it as an opportunity to innovate. I say it simplistically, but it works. So.
Well, and then ultimately the last thing, kind of going back to our different personality types, is know yourself.
Yep.
Honestly know yourself, or surround yourself with people who you can be your transparent, authentic self with, who know your strengths and weaknesses. And the purpose of that is not to get really, really good at all your weaknesses. I'm gonna find out my biggest weaknesses and get really. No, it's actually to acknowledge where you're really good, and you don't need a lot of help with things, and don't spend a lot of time getting help with or paying for help with things in those areas, right? As opposed to building yourself up with people who can help you in the areas that you're weak, as opposed to constantly banging your head against the wall doing things you're never going to do well.
Yep. So true.
And that's maybe controversial, non-Western way of looking at things, but we found a lot of success in our business and with our clients with that style of thinking. And I think it's worth a shot if you haven't done it that way, right?
Absolutely.
What do you have to lose? You can always go do it the other way, right?
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Really good conversation today. I liked it.
Yeah, it was good stuff. I enjoyed it too, as I usually do. It's just feeling more and more comfortable as we keep plugging along and pushing these things out. Want to thank everybody for joining us today. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and found, as we usually hope, found some insight and some new perspective, revolutionary thinking, which is the whole purpose and theme of the show. Remember to check out our YouTube channel, Being Revolutionary, please, as well as our podcast stuff.
Yep. And then do all the normal stuff. Like the episodes, subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, drop us a review. All of that stuff is helpful just for the visibility of the content. We know we ask every time, but that's because can be important for other people. And share episodes, right? It's very easy to drop a link in an email and send it to a colleague, or just, use that little share button on your iPhone and pop it in a text message and shoot it to somebody. Unless you're completely embarrassed and ashamed of everything we're saying,
right?
In which case, do a little soul searching and then share it anyways.
It's not all about you. No,
it's all about us.
That's right.
No, it's a good way to have a conversation starter around complicated topics. And I genuinely believe this, that the better community of people we have talking about these types of things, the less hard they get for all of us to do, because we start to recognize that, guess what, we're all having to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And that community aspect is so important to what we do. I really believe it. It's what gives us the energy to come to work every day. And work with people through great, decent, and horrific circumstances with a smile on our face and enjoying it. So keep up the good work and stick with us. We're going to keep talking through these concepts and others. And of course, let us know if you want to hear anything more in depth or on the fringes of what we've talked about. And other than that, we'll catch you guys next time. Matt, thanks for putting this episode together. I think it was a really good conversation. And unless you have anything else, I will sign us off for the day, and we'll catch up with y'all next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being revolutionary.
Being Revolutionary is produced by Matthew Phillips and Nathan Brown in partnership with Trilogy Financial. Research by Nathan Brown and Matthew Phillips. Editing, music, and recording by Paper Street Productions. Art by Matthew Phillips.
All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. diversification does not protect against market risk.
The opinions voiced in this show, being revolutionary, are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial advisor, or tax advisor prior to investing. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly.
Matthew Phillips is an investment advisor representative for Trilogy Capital. Investment advisory services offered through Trilogy Capital Inc., a registered investment advisor. Trilogy Capital markets advisory services under the name of Trilogy Financial, an affiliated but separate legal entity. California license 0K03460. Nathan Brown is a registered representative for LPL Financial and an investment advisor representative for Trilogy Capital. Securities offered through LPL, member FINRA SIPC. California license 0F37267.